All right. Ready to dive into a world where, well, buildings can kind of whisper stories.
Sounds intriguing.
We're headed to Tel Aviv.
Ah, Tel Aviv.
But we're not just there for, the food or the beaches. We're joining this conversation between Liat and her father, Nissim.
Okay.
They're discussing the city's architecture.
I see.
So think of it like we're eavesdropping on this really fascinating history lesson, but like with a personal twist.
I like it. So what are we diving into specifically?
Well, they start talking about this thing called the international style, which is like everywhere in Tel Aviv, especially those older neighborhoods.
Right. It's almost like stepping back in time when you walk through those areas.
And speaking of stepping back in time, Liat actually lived in one of these buildings.
Oh, really?
She mentions how much she loved just hanging out on the balcony and getting that, like, European vibe.
I can picture it now. It's amazing how our surroundings, even those from our past, can really stick with us, isn't it?
Totally. And her father, Nissim, brings up a really interesting point about how, architectural design has, like, totally evolved. He's talking about going from those super detailed miniature models
Yeah.
to, like, the crazy high-tech simulations they use these days.
It's incredible how technology has kind of revolutionized so many fields, architecture included. But I have to admit, there's still something really charming about those old school models.
For sure. But getting back to Tel Aviv,
Yeah.
they mentioned this thing called the White City.
Oh, yes.
And I gotta say, it sounds pretty intriguing.
It really is. Picture this. Over 4,000 buildings,
Wow.
all designed in the international style, bathed in that beautiful Mediterranean light. It's actually the largest cluster of Bauhaus architecture anywhere in the world.
No way.
Yes.
That's incredible.
A UNESCO World Heritage Site, in fact.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, no wonder Liat wants to snag a renovated Bauhaus apartment on Balfour Street, right?
Right, who wouldn't? Although she does mention living on Schenken Street, too.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all, charming balconies and European vibes, if you catch my drift.
Oh,
Liat tells this kind of funny story
okay.
about how, despite, the building's architectural significance, she wasn't actually allowed to have a washing machine in her apartment.
What? Why not?
Outdated infrastructure. Can you believe it?
Oh, no.
So it's a good reminder that even these iconic buildings, these really beautiful buildings, can have their, let's say, quirks.
right.
And preserving history
Yeah.
sometimes comes with its own set of, well, everyday challenges.
It's like that saying, they don't build them like they used to.
Right.
And sometimes maybe that's for the best.
Exactly.
But speaking of how they used to build things,
Yeah.
let's dive into this Bauhaus thing a little deeper, shall we?
Let's do it.
So imagine this. Germany, right after World War I.
Okay.
Cities are, well, they're scarred. Resources are incredibly scarce. And there's this incredibly urgent need to rebuild.
Of course.
And they need to do it fast.
Makes sense.
That's where Bauhaus comes in.
Ah, Bauhaus. So in 1919,
Okay.
this architect, Walter Gropius,
Love these.
he's tasked with heading up this new school,
Right.
the Bauhaus.
Bauhaus. Okay.
And they championed this radical, shift
Yeah.
in design philosophy.
I like it. So what were they, like, pushing for?
So instead of those old,
Yeah.
ornate, expensive designs of the past,
Right.
they were all about functionality.
Okay.
Clean lines, simplicity.
I like where this is going.
It was called form follows function.
Okay.
So the idea that the building's design
Right.
should be driven by its purpose.
It's like, why build a, fancy birdhouse when a simple box will keep the birds just as dry, right?
Exactly. And this was revolutionary at the time,
Right.
especially in a time of, scarcity.
Yeah, of course.
Bauhaus wasn't about, showing off or anything. It was about creating these practical, affordable,
Yeah.
and aesthetically pleasing spaces
Yeah.
for everyone.
It's like they accidentally invented minimalism.
Right.
Yeah.
And speaking of minimalist,
Oh, no.
the Nazis were not fans.
Oh, right. I almost forgot about, that whole piece of history.
Yeah, so the Nazi regime saw Bauhaus as a threat.
Really?
Too progressive,
Okay, yeah.
too cosmopolitan,
Right.
and too intertwined with Jewish artists and architects, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
So in the 1930s,
Okay.
they forced the Bauhaus school to close.
Wow.
It closed its doors.
And that's how all those, incredible architects,
Yes.
including several Jewish architects,
Yeah.
they fled Germany, right?
Exactly. They took those Bauhaus ideals with them,
Right.
seeking refuge. And, well, they found a new home.
Yeah.
You guessed it, Tel Aviv.
It's like all the pieces of the puzzle are coming together now.
All
While
right.
Germany was like shutting down all this creativity,
Mhm.
Tel Aviv was this young city, right?
Bursting with energy and, welcoming these immigrants
Absolutely.
and embracing a socialist ethos that, honestly, lined up perfectly with those Bauhaus principles.
It really did, yeah. It was the ideal environment for
Yeah.
this architectural style
Right.
to not just survive, but to really, really thrive.
And thrive it did.
Yeah.
I mean, remember Lyatt's dream of living on Balfour Street,
Right.
surrounded by those, iconic white buildings?
Yes, that's the legacy of Bauhaus in Tel Aviv.
Okay.
But it didn't just stay in the White City, did it?
Right. Lyatt and her father, they also talk about
Yeah.
how this international style kind of popped up in other parts of Israel, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Each with its own unique twist.
Exactly.
They mention Jerusalem's garden neighborhoods where those modernist principles meet, like
Yeah.
that traditional Jerusalem stone,
That's true.
creating something totally unique.
Yeah. It's actually fascinating how adaptable these core design principles were.
Yeah, totally.
Even the kibbutzim.
With their focus on communal living,
Yeah.
they incorporated elements of that international style,
Huh.
especially in those dining halls and communal spaces,
That's really cool. It really highlights how Bauhaus transcended those social and economic barriers.
It did.
It offered a blueprint for this more functional and aesthetically pleasing way of living.
I agree. Speaking of blueprints,
Oh, yeah.
Late and Nissim bring up this really crucial point
Okay.
about these, beautiful Bauhaus buildings.
Okay.
It's one thing to admire them, right?
Right.
From afar,
Yeah.
but actually living in them,
Right.
especially those that haven't been renovated.
Right. Right.
That's a whole different story.
Oh, the washing machine saga.
Exactly. And it's a funny anecdote,
Yeah.
but it speaks to this larger truth.
Okay.
Those sleek lines, that minimalist facade,
Right.
they often hide aging infrastructure.
Yeah, that's true.
So preserving history.
Yeah.
Sometimes it means more than just appearances.
Of course. Of course. It's all about balance, right?
Right.
Honoring the past, but adapting to the present,
Mm-hmm.
making sure these architectural gems are functional, livable
Yeah.
for generations to come,
Exactly, yeah.
But before we get too caught up in the, the practicalities of it all,
Right.
Nissim leaves us with this really tantalizing thought.
Yeah.
He mentions how Bauhaus continues to influence architecture even today.
Really?
It's like that old saying,
What's that?
what's old is new again, but with blueprints instead of bell-bottoms.
I like that. And that's what's so exciting.
Right.
How did a movement born out of necessity in post-war Germany become so ingrained in the DNA of modern design?
Right.
Pretty amazing.
That's a great question.
That's what we'll uncover as we continue this deep dive.
I'm ready. Let's do it. So we've gone from those charming balconies in Tel Aviv all the way back to, the birth of Bauhaus in post-war Germany.
It's quite a journey.
It really is. But what's really got me thinking is what Nissim said about Bauhaus still being relevant in architecture today.
Oh, it's true. It's like those little echoes you hear in music,
Yeah.
But this time it's like architecture riffing on this style that's, a century old?
That's wild. And it makes sense when you think about it. Bauhaus was all about, getting rid of the unnecessary.
Right.
Just focusing on functionality and that really clean design.
Absolutely. Those principles are, they're timeless, aren't they?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're more relevant than ever now,
Yeah.
especially with how much we love our technology these days.
Of course.
Oh.
Think about it. It's like our smartphones.
Right.
Nobody wants to use a phone with a million buttons anymore.
No way.
We all want that sleek, intuitive design.
Totally.
And it all goes back to those Bauhaus principles,
It's like that whole less is more thing.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
just makes sense.
Yeah.
But it goes way beyond just technology, too.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. Think about how popular minimalist design has become.
Yeah. Okay.
Like furniture, fashion, even websites.
Right.
It's everywhere you look.
That's true.
And it all kind of comes from that same desire.
Yeah.
Simplicity, functionality
Right.
that Bauhaus was all about.
So Bauhaus basically went from this post-war necessity
Right.
to influencing this sleek modern design that's everywhere these days.
Pretty incredible. It proves that saying, right?
Which one?
Necessity really is the mother of invention.
That's true. But are we talking about subtle influences here, or are there actual buildings being built today that are hey, I'm Bauhaus 2.0.
Oh, for sure. You'll see it, definitely.
Mhm.
Architects all over, they still draw inspiration from Bauhaus all the
Oh,
time.
I love that.
Like you'll see contemporary buildings with those classic flat roofs, maybe an asymmetrical facade, or those big windows Bauhaus was famous for.
Yeah, I have seen that.
So they're like little nods to the past,
Yeah.
but obviously updated for, well, the 21st century.
It's like a secret handshake, but for architecture.
Right. But you're right, it's
Yeah.
not just about like copying the look.
Right.
It's more about taking those core ideas, that functionality
Mm.
and simplicity,
Yeah.
and, well, actually using them to solve modern design problems.
Wow, we've gone from washing machines in Tel Aviv to the entire global legacy of Bauhaus.
That's the beauty of these deep dives.
It is. It's like opening up this whole new way of seeing things.
Exactly.
I'm already looking at buildings differently, like spotting those clean lines, thinking, it's a little Bauhaus I see.
That's what it's all about, right?
It really is. Well, as we resurface from our deep dive into Bauhaus, I have one last thought for you, dear listener. Take a look around, wherever you are. What style are the buildings around you? What stories do they tell? How does that built environment, those spaces we're in every single day, how do they shape our experiences, even in the smallest ways? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep your eyes peeled for those little echoes of the past and the world around you.
Well said. Until next time, keep diving.